Jesus, if anybody remembers that guy, he said, they will hate you and persecute you for my sake if you follow in my footsteps. So, by the way, pick up your cross and follow me.
Welcome to Lions Awaken Show, the show where you can hear the truth about controversial issues that are going on that people do not want to talk about. With us today, we have a special guest with us today that is fearless when it comes to speaking the truth, especially about Islam and Marxism. Mr. John Guandolo from Texas. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Great to be here.
Mr. Guandolo is the president and founder of Understanding the Threat, which is the only organization in America providing tools to leaders, police, and citizens to identify and dismantle jihadi/terrorist and communist networks in their local communities. He advises governments, the U.S. and others on matters related to national security, specifically the threat from the global Islamic movement. He actively briefs and teaches members of Congress, senior military officials, police, the intelligence community, key community leaders, and others. He served as a guest lecturer at the Joint Forces Staff College and at the U.S. Army War College. He's a member of the Veterans of Foreign War, the American Legion, and the Force Reconnaissance Association. He frequently appears on television and radio and regularly publishes articles related to these matters in a number of media outlets. He's also the co-author of the book Sharia, The Threat to America, and authored the books Raising a Jihadi Generation and Islam's Deception, The Truth About Sharia. His books may be purchased at his website at understandingthethreat.com or at Amazon.
What a record.
Wow. So first of all, thank you for fighting for our country and defending our freedom for the service you've done for our country. I appreciate that.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for saying so.
All right. Well, I guess I'll kick off the first question. Mr. Guandolo, you have a website called understandingthethreat.com, like what Matthew was saying. And your mission statement here is to empower citizens, elected officials, and police to dismantle the Marxist, communist, and jihadi networks inside the United States and reestablish America's founding principles in their community. So with that being said, could you just identify for us some of the major communist and jihadi networks operating in the U.S. today?
Sure. So from the communist side, we can look at groups like the Chinese Communist Group, Black Lives Matter, which was founded by the largest Chinese communist organization in America, Antifa, Democratic Socialists of America, Communist Party USA, groups like the Green Party, which is the one coordinating the new Green Deal, which is all about destroying the underpinning of the free market economy and the freedom in the economic. Each one has its own role, but those are some of them. And then I would have to say the Democrat leadership in the United States. The Democrat Party has become the real key mover for the communist movement in the United States. And if you're, what we used to say, we're talking about the national Democrat leadership, because if you look at the platform of the Democrat Party, it's counter to unalienable rights. It's counter to liberty in many forms. It assaults the free market and it assaults the constitutional republic, just their platform. If you look at the recent Rasmussen poll, it appears that the majority of people that call themselves Democrats in America are fascists, are tyrants. You have 59% saying that if you're unvaccinated, you should be mandated to remain in your house indefinitely. You have 45% of Democrats polled in the recent Rasmussen poll, which was released less than a week ago, that say you should be incarcerated if you're unvaccinated. That's the stuff of Nazis and Stalinists. And that's your Democrat, your average Democrat, not just the leadership. And that's a disturbing poll. Even if you say there's a 10% margin of error, which Rasmussen is saying there's not, that's a massive number. Even if we were to say 20% of Democrats polled think you should be incarcerated for not being vaccinated.
Too much.
This is staggering. This is why we have so much friction. So those are some of the groups on the communist side, certainly not all of them. You've got a number of groups like Center for American Progress and others, and key players would be guys like John Podesta, who's heavily on the political side, George Soros on the funding side, that kind of stuff. Then when it comes to the jihadi movement, you've basically got all of the prominent Islamic organizations in the United States, as well as some that aren't so prominent. But the U.S. But let me break it down into bigger form. So you've got the Muslim Brotherhood movement, which is the leading element. You've got the Iranians here, both in the form of an Iranian government entities like the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, Hezbollah, which is a part of the Iranian government, their assets. And we're not even talking about like counterintelligence officers and those kinds of things. We're just talking about the bigger movements. You've got groups like the movements like Jamati Islami and Tablighi Jamaat. And then you've got, of course, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah cells, which I just mentioned, Hamas cells. But the real point of the spear in the United States is the Muslim Brotherhood movement in North America and in Europe, really. And we can go into more depth about that. But when you look at, for instance, right now as we speak, which was the impetus for a terrorist attack in Colleyville, Texas this past weekend, you have the leading Islamic organizations, which are all Muslim Brotherhood, U.S. Council of Muslim Organizations, Islamic Circle of North America, Islamic Society of North America, the Council on American Islamic Relations CARE, which is a Hamas group, all calling for the release of the Al-Qaeda operative Afia Siddiqui, which is exactly what the guy at the synagogue, and she is a weapons of mass destruction operative for Al-Qaeda.
Wow.
And that's who they want released. So just think about that. And these are the most prominent Islamic organizations that are welcomed in the White House, in state capitals, inside churches and synagogues. I mean, many Protestant Catholic Christians welcome these groups into their churches to tell them all about how awesome Islam is. A huge number of synagogues around the United States bring these people in, just like the synagogue that was taken over by the jihadi. They do outreach to these kinds of groups all the time. So that's the big overview, and I'll let you guys dive in however deep you want to go.
Yeah, so I guess first you touched a little bit on the communists, and you said the numbers of how many have these Stalinists and ideas that we should go to prison if we don't have the vaccine. How did we get to this point? How have they infiltrated us so much? And how long has this been going on in America?
That's a great question. And so the communists were here by 1920. And we have records of the American delegation to Comintern back in the early 1920s. We have photographs, notes, meaning delegates of communists here in the United States going over to these Communist Party meetings to talk about how to spread communism in the United States. And they believed back then, literally 100 years ago, that they would take the United States. We have their doctrine, the Communist Manifesto. We have their strategic, how they intend to operationalize that, which I think is best summarized in the book Rules for Radicals when you look at their operational plan. But if you go back, when people ask us, understanding the threat, how do we have such an understanding of the network, the doctrine, the modus operandi, is because you just got to read their stuff. You've got literally a massive amount of declassified FBI investigations, all of the investigations from the House Un-American Activities Committee. You've got the Matroikin files, which was the KGB archivist for over 30 years, Vasily Matroikin, who brought notes of KGB operations, which included numerous operations in Europe and the United States when he defected to Britain. You've got guys like Yuri Bezmenov who defected to Canada and explained exactly how the communists go into a Western non-communist nation and subvert it. We have testimony both in the House Un-American Activities Committee and in Congress since the 30s to today of KGB defectors, Communist Party USA defectors. And quite frankly, in the last 10, 15 years, you can just go to their websites. They're kind of out in the open now.
Yeah.
They're marching down the streets in America calling for the overthrow and communist government to be installed. And so who they are and what they're doing is known. And the communists have been doing this for 100 years. The jihadis in the United States have been here since the early 60s, and they have established a massive network. They also have a doctrine, an operational strategy, lines of operation to do it. And we can track their identifiable network, and they're working in all the same areas. They're working in the media. They're working in the financial sector. They're working in the school system. They're working in the government. They're working at the local state level. They're working with legislators at the local, state, national level. They have massive information operations and propaganda to support what they're doing. So here's the answer to your question. The communists have had a 100-year movement to specifically subvert and overthrow the government. The communists in the United States have been here for 60 years, or more than 60 years, to do the same thing. And at the local, state, national, and international level, these two movements are working together. And so what you're witnessing, I would say in the last 2 years, you can say more, but it's been building. What we've seen the last 2 years is the intentional outcome of these two massive, very well coordinated movements at the international down to the local level. That's how this is happening. And our response as a nation has been almost nothing, has been almost insignificant.
So how close do you see them succeeding, like with taking down America? Like, obviously they've been here for so long, and we just see this. It's been gradually getting worse and worse, and now it just seems like, they're in power and they're getting away with all this stuff. So what will it look like? What will America look like if they succeed?
Well, I think you're starting to see that. You have these fascists who call themselves Democrats saying that people that make their own free choice to get vaccinated or not vaccinated, if you make the choice not to get vaccinated from this SARS-CoV-2 or whatever the latest iteration happens to be, then you should be locked up. 45% say you should be locked up. So what do I see the outcome is? People that do not want to be imprisoned for making a personal medical decision. I think you're going to see these are the kinds of things we're seeing in Europe. They're clashing on the streets right now with local police, who I would say are Nazis. These police and these local leaders and these members of parliament and these presidents and prime ministers in Europe, they're no better than Hitler. They're no better than Stalin. They're no better than Mao. This is how this works. And so at the state level, what it looks, well, at the national level too, you probably will have 2, 3, maybe 4 states that remain intact. I think the rest of the nation will be fractured by counties or by regions of the state, which will be patriots and traitors.
So you see,
that's what it's going to look like. What it looks like as we build up to it are, as these people keep walking into businesses and threatening people who aren't making all their customers mask up. So these are all potential flashpoints in real time. When police start coming to people's homes to take their weapons or to take them to prison, to jail for not being vaccinated, like they're doing in New York City, by the way, arresting people who don't have their vaccine cards. This is the stuff that was going on in 1930s in Germany. when we were putting, not we, when they were putting people on trains because they belonged to a particular group of people, be they gypsies or Jews or whatever. This is where we are. And I think part of the issue with, I would say, a huge portion of Americans, because our focus is in the United States, we still do a little bit of advice to people outside the United States, but it's gotten so bad. Our entire focus is the United States. Can't really spend a lot of time working with the Europeans. They've got their own issues. This is as bad as we've ever seen it. And Americans have got to realize that this is where we are. And a huge problem is psychologically, people are still having a hard time grasping what's actually happening around them.
Wow. So what you're basically saying, because a lot of us, when we think of Islam or communism, knowing the facts, it's a very deadly force, right? And so, but what we're seeing is that these two forces have joined together with one goal, which is to take down America. But what you're saying is they have basically declared war on America. What kind of war is this in? Because this sounds more like a psychological, political war, basically, because they've done it through things that a lot of times we don't think that's how they're going to do it, because we think of Islam, they take over through regimes, and guns,
By
or
force.
communism. We think of Stalin and Mao killing all these people. But we see them coming in. I guess what is their main strategy is kind of deception, right? You guys have found a lot of deception with people lying and making it sound good, I guess, because with that Texas example as well, you said a lot of these Islamic groups, they denounce the whole thing, but in reality, they're actually part of it, right? Behind the scenes.
Yes. So far, you all are batting 1,000 with your questions. These are really good. So you've made a couple real astute points, and I want to explain, certainly for your viewers, where we are with this. So let's talk first about the Islamic movement and communist movement working together. So let's start at the international level and work down to the local level in the United States. A year and a half ago, we see at the international level, communist China joining in a strategic partnership with Iran, the largest state sponsor of terrorism on the planet. We see several years ago, 2016, before the election, the leader of, at the time, the U.S. Muslim Brotherhood and the leader of Hamas, Nihad Awad, speaking at a Muslim Brotherhood conference in Chicago, saying Black Lives Matter is our matter. Their campaign is our campaign. Now, for those who are confused, Black Lives Matter was never taken over by Marxists or communists. It was created, Liberation Road and Freedom Road Socialist Organization, the largest Chinese communist organization in the United States. Black Lives Matter was born out of that. So people need to understand that this is not a gray area. Black Lives Matter was, is, and will be a communist organization. Now, there may be people marching in the streets behind BLM and wearing BLM hats and T-shirts that are completely clueless that they're supporting the communist takeover of the United States, but they are. And as a matter of fact, part of the communist doctrine is it's important that most of the people supporting what they're doing don't know.
Exactly.
And are not aware of what they're doing. And that's part of the deception. They don't just deceive, they deceive people to get into their movement, which is exactly what the Islamic movement does. So now down to the local level, when we have the whole George Floyd operation, the whole narrative that this innocent, beautiful, angelic man is tragically murdered, intentionally murdered by these racist police, that you can't pay attention to the fact some of those police were Black because that destroys their narrative, but we don't let the facts get in the way of their story. And the fact this guy had a record a mile long, including violence, and he wasn't a good man. He was a bad guy, but it doesn't matter because it's about a narrative. It's about a story, which then allows them to burn down America, and American politicians, Democrat and Republican, get in behind this. And American Democrats and Republicans like George W. Bush, say America is systemically racist. And so they regurgitate the communist narratives to advance the communist movement. And that's how this works. So we see then Muslim Brotherhood groups like CARE, same people we just talked about, Muslim Student Association, Muslim American Society, Islamic Society of North America, Islamic Circle of North America, CARE, all hosting events all across the country with BLM, Antifa, and other communist groups. So down to the local level in places like Charlotte, North Carolina, Nashville, Tennessee, Atlanta, Georgia, Los Angeles, Kansas City, Tampa, Florida. They're having all these rallies to support George Floyd, and it's the communists and the jihadis working together.
Wow.
Their divide and conquer strategy.
Yeah. So, okay, we've identified the threat, which is communism, Marxism, Islam, jihadis. So what are some practical ways patriots, conservative Christians can fight back against these ideologies? And yeah, what are some practical ways to fight back against them?
Okay. So a couple points I'd like to make quickly to kind of set the table to answer that question. Number one is there are probably a lot of people that watch you that are asking, why isn't he saying something about the globalists or the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab or the Satanist movement or the secular humanist movement? But here's why. We're well aware of all these things that are going on where people are not ideologically aligned with the communists or the jihadis, but they're supporting them financially, materially. They are greasing their efforts. And I've had people say, taking over the banking system is much more dangerous than some of the stuff you're talking about. Well, that's debatable. I think a nuke going off in a U.S. city is probably more dangerous, but we could actually make the argument, and we can have that discussion. What I'm saying is and this goes to set up for the answer to your question about what can you do, where the rubber meets the road in the local community, the people that are enacting all this stuff, the primary actors are the communists and the jihadis. So when I get to what's the solution, if you were to flush the communists and jihadis out of a particular county, then somebody could pour $10 million into that county to try and, destroy that county in a part of a state. And it wouldn't go anywhere because the hostile actors have all been flushed out, or even if a lot of them have been flushed out, the effect then is significantly minimized. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The other thing people need to understand is, number one, this is primarily an information war, as you all alluded to. The violence is only used to advance the 90 to 95% of the war, which is being fought in the nonviolent realm. All this outreach to churches and synagogues, to police, to local schools and universities, to the business community. The whole purpose of this outreach is to subvert them. And because people have no understanding of that, and because, quite frankly, most Americans are good-natured and good-hearted, then they will often take people at their words without doing their homework. So you're sitting there talking to a leader who's a terrorist, but because he has a suit on and tells you how much he likes you and how wonderful it is to actually finally meet somebody that we can have a real dialogue with and how great this is, well, they're lying. And deception is at the center of what they do, both the communists and these suit-wearing jihadis. And the final point to make to set the table for this answer is the biggest perpetrators in all of this are people that should be on our side. You know, a Republican has the word republic in their name. And yet the Republican Party at the national and state level across the United States has not only done nothing to thwart any of this, minus a few individuals, your Ted Cruz's, your Jim Jordans, and, you know, people like that, you know, Matt Getz. But okay, everybody probably watching you all could name the 5 or 6 people out of the entire U.S. Congress that's actually done something. And when we had Republicans in the House leading, Republican Senate, Republican president, what did they do? Only because Mr. Trump had to shove stuff down their throat that stuff get done. You know, Mitch McConnell, bad guy, not batting for our team. So we have to understand that that's the case. And this goes, by the way, for Christian pastors too. Most Christian pastors are not only not doing anything, they're more worried about building their own fiefdom than they are about building the kingdom. Mm-hmm. And so they're more worried about the numbers of people in their church and not speaking too much truth, because they might thin our numbers, which means we can't build the $2.5 million audio visual complex we'd like to have. And this is where we find ourselves. We'd rather get along in the community, which means I can't really speak too much truth about these things. I've been doing this a long time, 20 years to be exact, both inside the FBI, inside the DOD, and now running Understanding the Threat. And I've been around the country and I have worked with numerous Christian organizations. And it's been, in some cases, incredibly invigorating with people that are very bold and brave and sticking to the truths that Jesus taught, and then some that aren't, a lot that aren't. And even when they hear the truth, they're afraid to act on it. Because if 20% of pastors in America stood up on this Sunday, and spoke the truth about what's actually going on and gave people some action items, this thing could turn around on a dime. But that hasn't happened. Mm-hmm. And the pastors that do speak out, because there are so few, most of them, the media and our adversaries, the adversaries of liberty, are able to target them. Mm-hmm. So because the federal government is literally, utterly corrupt, all components of the government, all the key components of government, and because these networks are so expansive and have so thousands of organizations that operate at the local, state, and national level, the only answer to this is at the local level, the county level. And so what we at Understanding the Threat do, and we're the only ones in the West doing it, is we go into a community when we're invited. We get a couple dozen people together and we run you through a 3-day program we call Into Action. And by the time you're done that 3-day program, you understand who the enemy is, how to find them in your community, how to organize as a team. We call them Liberty teams, but you're not our team. You're your own team. We're just training you. You learn how to identify these hostile organizations and leaders in the community. We show you how to flush them out, how to prioritize these things, and then how to get to work. And the key is you not only flush out these bad people and their organizations lawfully, but very aggressively in some cases, but you must reestablish the Republican form of government at the county level and eventually at the state level. Because without that, all that work is for naught, because the Republican form of government must be reestablished. And per our founding fathers, per the Declaration, our entire law and government is based on the law of nature and the law of nature's God, which was legally defined at the time of the founding as God's will as he reveals himself in nature and Holy Scripture. And so no law, according to the legal standard at that time, no law at any level in the United States could be legislated which violated the law of nature and the law of nature's God. And when even today, I think of an example in South Carolina, not less than a year ago, when we briefed a group of 400 Christian patriots. And I asked them, how many of you are aware that at the time the Constitution was ratified, every state constitution in America had a requirement that to hold public office, you must publicly profess fidelity to the Christian faith? And literally nobody knew that. And they gasped. And that's been my experience. So until we actually put the Bible back in elementary schools and teach the true American foundation and require our leaders to adhere to the fidelity of love God, love neighbor, and that the will of God as he reveals himself in creation, Holy Scripture, that becomes the moral standard for the republic and how we govern. And I will tell you, just teaching that part is a part of the training. We do about an hour and a half piece on America's foundation, law, and government. People say that is the best session of the entire course, because without understanding who we are and what we're fighting for, then we're really fighting for nothing.
Right.
But that's the key. Local level, we're the only ones doing it. I encourage people, go to understandingthethreat.com, contact us on the contact page, say, hey, we've got 24 people here. What's it take to get you guys here and get this training going? And let's go, because our goal is to train as many communities around the country as quickly as possible.
That's awesome.
Wow, that is awesome. So what you're saying is that just as big as the threat is, the importance of instilling the American values in people is just as important to fill that gap. If you purge, I guess, the enemy.
Absolutely.
And another thing that I'm hearing is that courage is very essential to do this, because to instill Christian faith back into education and local community, it's going to take courage, and it's going to take a willingness to face a backlash that will make you look like a very evil person, like they have already done to the Christian faith. Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, I would agree. And I would just, since you mentioned in the beginning, the preponderance of your viewers are likely Christians, it amazes me the number of Christians I've run into who think that because you're a Christian, especially people that are new converts, are taught in a lot of churches I've been to that, when you become a Christian, it's like this pink cloud covers you and unicorns dance around with cherry pie and, cotton candy. And it's like this fantasy land. And that's not what Jesus said. Jesus, if anybody remembers that guy, he said,
Real.
they will hate you and persecute you for my sake if you follow in my footsteps. So, by the way, pick up your cross and follow me, because it might be a rough road, but it's the road. And it's the road that leads to your salvation. And it's the road that leads to true peace. And that is what I think we've forgotten. And so when I hear Christians utter comments about, times in the Christian church, and they talk about historical things that have happened, and I love that, because I will ask them, what do you actually know about that? Whether it's the Crusades or these other things, what do you actually know about that? Because what you're doing right now is you're talking out your backside and you're showing me you're grossly ignorant. You have no idea. But the time is coming, boy, you sit in your, $300,000 home in a very comfortable environment. Our brothers and sisters in places like Ethiopia and Egypt and Syria and Afghanistan are being slaughtered and tortured for the name of Jesus, while you go to your interfaith outreach at the local mosque and tell me how friendly they are. I mean, that's how stupid and dangerous you are. And I think it's time for Christians to start grabbing these Christians up and saying, you're no longer welcome here, because what you're teaching is not Christianity. It's not Jesus.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right. That's a false gospel.
I found cowardice is just as bad as evil itself. So I'm glad you said that. But I think you should come back to South Carolina and do this teaching, because I think
To the church.
it'd be, to the church. It'd be very beneficial for us.
I'd love it. If you guys really, we need, kind of 24 is and we can do it more than once, obviously, if you want to do it, but 24 people that actually get trained can have, you wouldn't believe the impact that will have in a community. I mean, the areas that we have teams in right now, they're having massive impact. We have some teams that are smaller than that, and they're having huge impacts. All it takes is a couple people that actually know where the bad guys are and have a lot of creativity and savvy to know how to screw with these people and make their lives miserable. And because they're bad people and they're not welcome in the community, and they shouldn't be welcome because they destroy liberty. And remember, both of these ideologies, Islam and communism, enslave people. And so if you want to defend that, well, have at it. But then if you start defending that, then you become an enemy of the patriots and an enemy of the Constitution and an enemy of the rule of law. And we should treat pastors and rabbis and anyone that supports this like that, because they are.
Wow, I 100% agree. Well, thank you so much. I think our time is basically up. I just want to, ask you one more question before we leave quick. What is the best way people can help your organization? What is your biggest need?
Thank you. So we tell people, get trained and get in the fight, or fund the war effort, or both, but certainly do one of those. So we encourage people, go to understandingthethreat.com, contact us on the contact page, say, hey, we do have a couple dozen people ready to go. What does it take to get you here for the into action training? And then we'll start that conversation. I encourage people to sign up for the newsletter on the homepage, because that plugs you in to everything we're doing. But then fund the war effort. Any amount. If you can say, I can give you $10 a month, that's awesome. That those recurring donations, those monthly donations to our partner, which is a group called Americans for America that has come shoulder to shoulder with it, a nonprofit, donate. If you can give more, obviously $25, $50, $100 a month, that's awesome. But any regular recurring donation becomes huge for what we're doing, because it takes resources to train, to bring to a big part of what we do is doing advanced training with these teams, to consult with them and help them, and continuing to do the support, the intelligence support and stuff for these teams around the country, as well as everything else we're doing. But the key is get trained or fund the war effort, please. And the donate button is right there on the homepage. So please do one of those two or both.
All right.
Put those in the link there.
Understandingthethreat.com and all your resources right there. All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Guandolo. I really appreciate you sharing what you did today and for the fight that you're doing for this country. Appreciate that. Keep doing what you're doing.
And thanks for your courage as well. It's very inspiring. So
that's right.
Thank you very much. And I really appreciate this. It's been a great interview. Thank you.
All right. God bless you. And thank you, viewers, so much for joining us today, for listening. And like he said, please go on understandingthethreat.com to learn more, to get engaged in this fight, so that you can enjoy your freedom, so that your kids, your grandchildren can enjoy this freedom, and fight the good fight. Till next time, God bless you.